I really do just love spamming Lash and then everything dies all around me. Oh, it's so much fun and nothing will ever change that. Thanks, Blizzard. Really appreciate that. Hello then, my fellow sorcerers, and yes, it is a sad day because Lash has been nerfed, as well as the main aspect that powers it. However, I have good news. It's not dead. It's nowhere near dead. It is still massively powerful. The nerf to the teleport doesn't really affect us, as the build is massively defensive anyway and it's not really needed. Only a 5% nerf to control doesn't really do much, as we're still doing 35% more damage to stun targets, and the lucky hit isn't really the end of the world with just how much hitting things we are doing, especially in our ultimate. You're gonna have this happen a lot. That said, I have made a major change to the build, which has improved it both in the face of this patch, and it would have improved it even without it too, so we will get to that. For now though, seriously, I mean, you're seeing it. I am clearing nightmare dungeons up to 10 levels higher than I am, absolutely effortlessly, melting down packs, melting down bosses. I mean, was a level 63 to my 54. We're fine, everyone. The main difference you're going to notice is with the Lash change itself, the glinting Lash cooldown reduction going to 0.15. Essentially, it just makes the build play a little bit slower. You will have your ultimate up slightly less, but that said, you're still going to be clearing incredibly fast and easily. And most importantly of all, the insane survivability of the build with its constant cooldown, barrier rotation, constant CC freezing is still firmly in place, and it lets you absolutely just tank enemies even in higher level nightmare dungeon pushing. That is excellent. I'm going to assume then that you know the core of the build, where you've put your points, how it's generally working. If not, I will link my guide on what to actually get point for point, level to level, and why it all works down below, so you can get up to speed for the changes to the build that I'm going to go over now, as well as the Paragon and uniques and legendaries and all that good stuff. Past that then, I have made one significant change that improves the performance, especially in the face of this update, and to help you pushing high level nightmares way beyond your actual level. Like this plus 14 that I'm doing in the background, where the enemies are level 67 and I'm level 54. And we'll also have a look at what you should be doing with your Paragon board to start with for Lash, as well as any legendaries that aren't aspects, any uniques, and anything you should be on the hunt for. So, this is the skill tree as I showed you it last time. I have now got all of the skill points available, so Hydra has a couple extra ranks in, and I did indeed finish Electrocution, as the survivability it gives is absolutely important. So how are we going to actually edit this now? Well, it's fairly simple. We're actually going to get rid of Hydra. Why are we doing that? What are we replacing it with? Well, first and foremost, we now want to put 2 more points into Fireball, as the damage from that enchantment is it carries in nightmare dungeons. The pop 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 around the screen, it's just so helpful, and amping that is really critical. And then for these last 3 points we have freed up, we are going to get a new source of burn to apply our lovely Devouring Blaze critical strike damage with, and that new source of burn is Flame Shield. Now yes, this only lasts for 2 seconds and has a decent-ish cooldown as opposed to Hydra just always up, but the advantage here is clear. This is AoE everywhere around you. It also does really decent damage and is a massively good lucky hit procer because it's hitting everyone around you with a decent 41% chance. This is also a fantastic way to address one other thing: survivability, because you will start to notice that you need a little bit more of it. We get Enhanced Flame Shield, and then we get Shimmering Flame Shield, so that when we put this on, we instantly get like a potion, essentially, and that is so unbelievably helpful. I cannot stress that enough when you start doing the harder content in the game. So what has actually happened here then? So now this is what our bars are looking like, and we now have Flame Barrier instead of Hydra, and you'll notice when we put it on, of course, we get our barrier for 30% of our life, thanks to the protection passive, and this is boosted by the ideal decoration that you want, the ideal gem in diamonds for barrier generation in armor, and while I'm here, you want critical strike damage to vulnerable enemies in your weapon, and in your jewelry, you want resistance to whatever is currently giving you trouble in the Nightmare Dungeon you're about to do. I did a poison-focused one where enemies constantly did poison, so I put in poison resist. That's an easy kind of ethos to go for your jewelry and your gem slots. In any case, we then also get that burst of electricity around us, because yes, of course, this means that when we have our Arc Lash enchantment, when you use a cooldown, everyone gets stunned. Well, this adds an extra cooldown, which means we get to AoE stun everyone around us with not just Frost Nova, not just Ice Barrier, not just Teleport, but now also Fire Shield as well, which is just really, really good, and you will notice it. You will be constantly CCing everyone. In terms of when to use the Flame Shield, well, obviously use it when you've stunned a boss, so you can start applying that extra crit damage, and then when you get swarmed by a huge screen of enemies, you want to put it on, start burning them all. That way everyone is getting that extra crit damage, not just what the Hydra heads were hitting, and of course it helps you burn down elites. But you've also got it as that defensive cooldown. Using it will give you a shield and heal you for half your health. That is so, and I really cannot stress this enough, so useful when you're in like nearly everything will almost one-shot you territory that is a high nightmare dungeons relative to your level. So that's essentially the swap here. The playstyle remains the same, except it's even simpler because literally you just Arc Lash. You just Arc Lash the things that you want to dead, and while you are doing that, you just rotate your cooldowns as you need them, freezing everyone, keeping them vulnerable, using your flame shield if you get a little bit low, and then obviously against bosses, against huge groups of enemies, against packs of elites, you have the unstable currents to start flying out those extra lightning spells to really melt the screen down, and once again, you just do that while rotating your cooldowns. It's beautifully simple, it's beautifully effective still, and it means we don't have to worry about the abysmal state of mana management that sorcerers have. The other builds are all fairly fun and strong, but you use like 3 spells and you're out of mana, and it feels so bad. I feel like sorcerer mana management has been something that's really kind of been overlooked in the class design, and while of course there are various ways to address it, to amp your mana regen, to have more, to make it feel better, it definitely isn't as spammy as I think we would all appreciate. So this is really fun to play, just a single super effective basic attack, and then just kind of literally all of the defensive skills and then an ultimate. What more could you want? So, talking of legendary effects and aspects then, well, let's get into this. There are 4 aspects that you can acquire from dungeons that really help this build and we care about. 2 of them are absolutely key. The first one is Rapid Aspect, to get that pure attack speed on your Arc Lash. The faster you Arc Lash, the better everything is. We want to hyper speed your Arc Lash. That's why Dexterity is actually a really good stat for this build, and you'll see that when we get to the Paragon board. We also then want ourselves Aspect of Control, which is one of the sadly nerfed things, but it only got nerfed by a max of 5%. It's still an absolutely massive damage amp, and you can see why. A huge percent increase against frozen and stunned enemies, and we are constantly freezing and stunning enemies. Lastly then, we have Edgemaster's Aspect. This is just percent increased damage if you have full primary resource. Well, we always do, because we're not spending mana on anything anymore with the Flame Shield swap. So this is just a pure permanent 10% damage increase at minimum. That is really delicious. Lastly then, we care about Aspect of Might, which gives us a 20% flat damage reduction when we use our basic skills, which we are permanently using, so this might as well just read, you forever take 20% less damage, and you can imagine how key that is as enemies start scaling ahead of you, pushing Nightmare Dungeon. So those 3 core aspects I told you about, I have my rapid on my amulet, which is where you want your rapid, as amulets get a 1.5 times buff to the aspect that's on them, and you want that attack speed as much as possible. My aspect of control then is on my ring, 35%, well 34, almost a perfect roll, more damage to those stunned enemies. That was a really good drop, and I won't be changing this for a while, I imagine. And then my edge masters that I've imprinted onto here is that 10% more damage, but the fact it goes up to 20 is just awesome, and I really want to get a good roll drop of this. Then we have something like deal X% more damage when you have a barrier active. Well, we constantly have a barrier active because we now have ourselves ice armor, and of course we've added flame shield, which means we have even more barrier uptime. And remember, crits lucky hits can reset our barrier cooldowns to give it even more. This is just awesome and definitely worth a weapon slot, as it can go up to 50%. Your burst window here is silly, especially against bosses. Then we have my helmet here, which has the Frost Nova one on. It gives an extra charge, but it does increase the cooldown. Obviously, you want this to be as low as possible, but having 2 charges is massively helpful. Lets you use it frequently more often, and is absolutely key for keeping bosses vulnerable as well, rotating Frost Nova charges. Your critical strike defensive cooldown reset will also reset a charge of it too for you while the other one is still cooling down, so you always have something available for that to proc and reset. So you always have something that's probably on cooldown for this to actually happen, so it definitely will happen every 10 seconds because we're just critting that much to everything all of the time. Then we have what I consider to be the probably best unique item for this build that at least I've come across so far. There are some obviously silly ones once you get into World Tier 4 and items get crazy, but something that you can get your hands on right now. I found 3 of these as Nightmare Dungeon rewards. Enemies that die while frozen have a % chance to unleash a Frost Nova. Enemies are going to die while frozen a lot in this build. It also gives you more damage to frozen enemies. Enemies are frozen a lot, and it will increase the duration they are frozen for, which is amazing. The intelligence, of course, is nice too. The Ice Heart Brias is simply MVP here, with the Ice Nova being weaved into the Arclash setup. So those being some good ones to look out for, let's move in to our Paragon board. This is where things get fun for, well, I guess everyone. Yes, across the board. We have had Paragons nerfed, but that equally affects everyone, so it doesn't inherently change anything. I'm obviously only on my first board as level 55. I really, again, need to get my grind on and get the rest, but I can still give you a very good idea here. Of course, we want to take the offensive path up to get our +% damage. We will get a few defensives later on, but not on your first board. Most importantly, then, is this glyph slot. Ideally, you want the control glyph. This is 20% more damage to stunned and frozen enemies, which, yes, and I realize I keep saying this, we're constantly stunning and freezing enemies. And then just a general +30% nearly damage to crowd-controlled enemies. In order to activate this, we need to get Dexterity in range, which of course I have got, and as I said, Dexterity is really good for this build because Dexterity equals crit chance, and the more we crit, the better everything is. So activating this and pumping it with Dexterity, and indeed upgrading it, is a really good idea to begin with, as we go up through the other rare node and onto the next board. I, of course, will do another version of this build, another update with a full Paragon board, or at least a lot deeper in, around level 65 towards 70 for you guys, really refine it and go over everything you could want, but I really just wanted to get an update on this out, as a lot of people are wondering if the nerfs have killed this build or not, which obviously it really hasn't. Then, if you want a few other glyphs to work with, you want Tactician when you can get it. This amps the power of all the rare nodes in range, which is really strong, and getting the % damage increase when we use a defensive skill. We are using all 4 defensive skills, so this will be up constantly when we use them. This again requires more dex, which is more crit, which is lovely. Then we have Exploit, which is fantastic here, more damage to vulnerable enemies thanks to our Frost Nova, However, we are constantly hitting vulnerable enemies, and again, Dex crit, this one speaks for itself. Then we want territorial. Enemies that are close to us, i.e. in our close range, which is anything we're killing, we do increase damage to. We also take less damage from, and again, Dex crit, this is a fantastic glyph to have for this build. Lastly then, Enchanter is what will polish this off. A pure intelligence one, and more intelligence just equals more damage. It shouldn't be ignored. It is still something we want to stack, and it gives us just pure elemental resistance to the 2 enchantment slots, so in this case fire and lightning, which are both very common damage types to have on affixes and elites in the Nightmare dungeons, so it's really useful. But more than anything, it's just pure damage increase from the main bonus, which is very, very nice to have. Simple, straightforward, and you can't go wrong with it. So obviously place these in the order that I showed you them. When you get to more and more rare glyph slots, activate them as soon as you can, and then move on through the tree, getting the rare nodes that are damage outputs. That is the general best advice for now. But again, I will return in the coming days with a proper higher level, more Paragon board unlocked and detailed go over of this build and how it's evolved. That then really is kind of it. The nerfs are a shame, but let's be honest, this was ridiculously strong, and hey, you know my build has got legs to it when Blizzard nerfed it 2 days into the game being out. So hey, you're in the right place for build guides. That's all I'm saying, alright? I think that's good as evidence as any. But no, of course, a lot of sorcerers are running this, and for good reason. It really is good, and there's many little variations you can do, like my new Flame Shield one, which I really would recommend. It will keep you alive and give you a lot more control, as you simply just need to manage cooldowns without worrying about a Hydra uptime anymore. Other than that, just play it the way you did play it before. Again, the link to the original video going through the entire build point by point is down below, and that's all well and good. So basically, don't worry, we're still ridiculously powerful. Enjoy playing the best class in the game with the best build. For now then, like you've enjoyed this, subscribe and hit the bell for more. Consider supporting the future of the channel on Patreon down below. And until we meet again, a goodbye.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.